All right, guys, before we get too far into it, I wanted to say hit that subscribe button if you like what we're doing here and want to see this thing keep growing. That subscription number is so important because the bigger it is, the more legitimate we look when I reach out to, huge car guys, huge names in the automotive world, all that kind of good stuff. The more legit this looks, the better chance we all have to sitting down with some really cool car guys and helping this thing grow. So guys, if you want to help the channel, help all of us get the best guests we can possibly get, hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. It goes a long way. Let's get to the video. Let's get into it, man. All right, guys, today we have freaking Wes Buck, owner of Drag Illustrated and biggest event promoter ever, and you're back here in your second home, Bradenton, at this point.
It's quickly becoming that, man.
Are you planning to just set up shop down here in Bradenton and
to be honest,
move in with us?
I think so. I really do. I mean, I tell my wife all the time, we relocated to Fort Worth from Northeast Missouri, where we were born and raised, about 3 years ago. Perfect timing to move across the country during COVID. A global pandemic always lends itself to relocation. But no, we moved across the country and relocated to Fort Worth. We're actually in a little town right outside of Fort Worth, Texas. But as much as we love it there and we'll never leave, we're Texans now, I would love to have a place in Bradenton. I think this is a special, obviously the racetrack, BMP, near and dear to my heart, Vic, and the whole squad down here. Yeah. But there's just good energy, and the weather, the way this place looks and feels, the culture, I will end up having a spot here.
It is really the only state that competes with Florida. I feel like you guys have more tracks, but you're also so damn spread out.
Yes.
That
Texas is big, bro.
Yeah.
It's bigger than a lot of countries.
Even we were talking about TX2K, and my wife's like, oh, it's only moving to Dallas from Houston. I'm like, that's not only.
It's 4+ hours depending on traffic.
Yeah, we were going to Houston, and she's like, oh, maybe we go to Dallas. I've always heard that's cool. I'm like, you don't just stop in there.
I used to say the same thing. We moved to Texas and it's let's run over to Waco. Well, Waco's a couple hours away.
Yeah.
It took me a long time growing up in a town of 15,000 people. Moving to a major metropolitan area my kids have adapted really well, which has been kind of the main thing we were worried about. Mm-hmm. But the whole situation is a touch overwhelming. But we like it, man. But
yeah, it's a good state. I've been there so many times to race at this point. It's probably my second most raced in state ever besides Florida. And Florida doesn't really have that many tracks.
Yeah.
To be as popular as it is for racing.
It's the year-round thing. And that's one thing I noticed leaving Missouri, growing up in the Midwest, your car stuff was parked 3 or 4 months out of the year minimum.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the thing that I enjoy the most about Texas so far is that you can pretty much, it's car weather almost year round. The biggest problem is that it gets so hot in late July and August that you don't really want to be outside in anything. Mm-hmm. But car culture is booming in that part of the country. Every imaginable cars and coffee and get together and truck meetup. It's
so many speed shops down there.
It's nuts, man.
I feel like the shops is a huge part of it, but then how is it moving a business? Did you?
Well, honestly, Drag Illustrated, it's kind of an interesting thing. You get it as a YouTuber and understanding the new age of business that we really never needed a brick and mortar location necessarily. So even from day one, we kicked the doors open on Drag Illustrated in October of 2005. So it's been 18 years ago. And even back then, all of us worked from home, and that was kind of the name of the game. So it's kind of funny, when COVID happened, we were more than prepared for remote working. It didn't slow us down at all, because while we've maintained, we have an office in Northeast Missouri, we have an office in Fort Worth, Texas, but most of our staff, they exist in home offices and things like that. So it really didn't slow things down at all. My biggest thing was being able to travel easier, because the situation I was in a little town called Kirksville, the closest international airports were St. Louis and Kansas City. So I'm driving almost 3 hours to St. Louis or 2.5 hours to Kansas City every time I go to a race, which is a lot. Mm-hmm. So I remember in 2019, I told my wife, because if you're going to a typical drag race that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you want to be there for all of it or have to be there for all of it, that means I'm leaving the house sometime on Thursday and not getting home till sometime on Monday. So a 3-day race turns into a 5-day trek, and it didn't bother me much when I was 21, 22 years old and full of energy and whatnot. But then you get busier, you get a little older,
kids,
you got wife and
wanna be there
kids,
for
I want to
them.
be home. And I told my wife in 2019, I think that year I went to 26 races, and I told her if I lived closer to an international airport that I could do like quick direct flights, I would be home a full calendar month more than I have been home for the past 15 years or whatever.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, okay, that makes sense. And so there was an opportunity that presented itself to relocate to Texas, and we jumped, man. We kind of felt like we were waiting for God or the universe or something to be the catalyst to get us to leave the little town. Like, home's always home, right?
Yeah.
And I love the place I grew up.
You need something like pulling you.
Yeah, but you need something to pull you out sometimes. And not that there was anything bad there, but it was just we wanted to kind of spread our wings and see what was out there in the world. And it's been the best thing that's ever happened to us.
That's funny because we were in a similar boat where I wanted to move closer to the racetrack down here, and my wife was like, Bradenton, like it's kind of the middle of nowhere. She loves it more than me now down here. Like, she
Same.
loves this area.
My kids love Texas. My wife loves Texas. We've all like adopted the culture. It's a great place. Like you hear about it. I always joke that you don't see people like walking around with tattoos of Missouri on their shoulder or whatever, but you see a Texas tattoo every time you open your eyes down there. And I think it's just, there's such a sense of community pride that I've never seen anything like it. It's a really crazy thing.
I don't even know what state Kansas City's really in.
They can't decide. You know, they got at some point they're going to have to make a decision. But
I just go there for the burnt ends.
Yeah, no joke, man. I love Kansas. Kansas City was actually on our short list, and if they didn't have the harsh winters that we also wanted to escape, we probably would have ended up there because it was like far enough away from home and closer to the airport, but we were still dealing with the weather. And I'm like, we got to go further south than that. So
you do have a nice centralized place because California's not too far of a flight.
Yeah.
And even with racing in Florida down here, everything, like any track that's outside of Florida is an additional 6 hours away. So like, because you think about flying, I got to think about driving. So like anything is like an extra 6 hours distance, no matter what track it is. South Georgia's like the closest other one to here. And thankfully that's another awesome facility. Some of the best tracks, some of the best races in the country are there too.
Oh yeah, great facility, great surface, good people. You know, great strong local fan base that they have there. Like that's been developed over the course of however many years now. But no, I like that place. That's, I think, what draws me to Bradenton. And I think this is something drag racing, like as a whole, we talk about this a lot internally at the magazine, is that I think our sport, it's like a band, right? I think certain artists sound better in a honky tonk than like a ginormous stadium or arena, right? And I think our sport, it's a little nitty gritty, right? Drag racing. It's a little rough around the edges. This is a sport that was built on the back of outlaws and gearheads. And I just think sometimes tracks like Bradenton, tracks like Valdosta, tracks like Darlington, tracks like XRP and outside of Dallas, like I just like tracks that kind of have that honky tonk vibe.
Yeah.
The surface is good. Obviously, you want to have a great place to race, but I like tracks that have some atmosphere, and that keeps being what draws me to Bradenton, to be honest.
It is definitely a different feel. It feels like you're right there. You're standing next to the owner at the starting line. It's not like there's no corporate overhead watching over everything. You don't feel like you're at this, like, you know, sometimes you show up with your street car for a test and tune and you feel like you might not belong when it's like $1 billion facility. But you go to Bradenton and you feel like, oh, like everybody here is just in their street car hanging out like me, because that's where we all enter, I imagine.
I sure think so. I mean, and I think, to be honest, God bless the Z-Maxes and the Strip in Las Vegas and all these incredible facilities. I'm not knocking them, but I do think, like, especially the streetcar scene, what I'm into primarily, the fast door slammer scene, but also even the nitro stuff, man, it all just, like, George Strait is going to sound different at Billy Bob's in Fort Worth than he does at some huge amphitheater or some huge arena. It's a different experience. And I just think drag racing plays well in those honky tonks. Not to say we can't have a killer drag race at a mega facility, but I like a vibe. I like an energy. And I mean, we experienced it at our race back in March, that there was just like something in the air. Right? I mean, that I just don't think we would have achieved. And it's also the scale of the facilities. I mean, you've been around this deal long enough to know that, like, selling tickets and filling these places up, it's not easy, right? You got to work hard at it. And
you got to give people a reason to come. Don't just expect, I think a lot of promoters get into that. They expect people are just going to come because you put your sign out that says a race is this weekend.
And they open the gates and honestly, I think there's a whole world, not to throw anybody under the bus, but man, there's a whole world of promoters and operators in our space that are kind of still operating under that mindset or under that belief system that, hey, we just got to throw the gates open. We've got a cool racetrack. People want to race. They're going to come. And in this day and age, with all the options and everything there is to do, besides go sweat your butt off and work your butt off going drag racing, you've got to really make it worth it. So that said, whenever I started kind of thinking about putting on events and getting back into the event space, I really kept that at the front of our, at the forefront of our mind collectively, that we need to go to places that we know we can pack, like that are big enough that you can get a meaningful crowd there, but aren't so big that no matter what we do, it's going to look like a ghost town, because the first World Series of Pro Mod was actually held at Bandimere Speedway in Denver. We did that in 2017, and that facility holds 30-some thousand people, and we had a hell of a crowd for the first year of our event, and we were super proud. But if you look at the photos, you're like, this place looks, like no one came. And it crushed me, right?
That's why NASCAR tracks paint every other seat to make it look like they're
taking
full.
Seats out. You know what I mean? They're selling grandstands and stuff because, and that's a whole other story. But I think as a sport, sometimes we have these boom periods or whatever, and everything gets bigger and the scale increases. And then if anything changes in the world, you've got to kind of adapt, and you go, okay, maybe some of these facilities are almost too big. The NHRA starts the season, well, not anymore, but historically has started the season with the Winter Nationals in Pomona. Heck, they have a whole section of grandstands that are just covered in sponsor banners, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I think I'd reduce some of the seating or find a way to fill it. You know what I mean? Whether it's some sort of ticket promotion, something special, work with local schools, whatever, parts stores, however you got to do it, because, man, I hate seeing grandstands empty. Drives me crazy.
I know. It's definitely sad. If you go to a comedy club, you get phone calls. They're trying to get you in there for free. They're like, hey, just come hang out, 2-drink minimum. It's that kind of thing. They just want you to go there because they know they'll sell some drinks, they'll sell some food. So if you start offering some free tickets, you'll still get people to come and spend money, and you will still get those racers that, bust their ass to not race in front of an empty crowd, because that hurts too as a racer when,
it's the worst.
You make your pass, pull your parachute, and there's no one even there.
I think that is another thing that our whole community sleeps on, is that we're all doing this we can be the most generous,
it's ego
whatever,
driven.
But it's an ego-driven deal, right? From top to bottom, left to right. No matter where you're in this space, whether you've got a top fuel dragster or you got a 10-second streetcar, it's about ego. And this goes back to the playwright days. There used to be the practice is called papering the house. So back in the day when a producer was putting on a play or some sort of production, they would paper the house. If they sold X amount of tickets, they would go give out tickets or whatever they had to do to fill those seats for a multitude of reasons. But one of them being they knew they'd get the best performance from their cast. Their talent is going to perform differently in front of a capacity crowd than they would, a sparsely attended event. So there's some method to the madness. I see some of these racing operations that have I'll get a phone call from an operator or a promoter, and it's oh man, I had a bunch of issues with my, racers are mad about this, or they don't like the schedule, or I've got some guys upset about these rules, or we've changed some of our parking things and they're mad about that. And I tell them all the same thing: pack that place full of people, and all that goes away. If that place is packed and these guys roll through the water and, limited vision with a helmet on and a Hans device, if they see people everywhere, it doesn't matter if they D&Q, red light, whatever, it massively changes their perspective because their ego has been fed. It's exhilarating and exciting for them. It's validating, all their friends that they brought are seeing them be the center of attention. That type of stuff gets overlooked, but it's a huge part of this game we're in.
There's something special about going to, with my deal, I race streetcar, so I don't get packed stands very often. It's it's not NHRA where those stands are full. At TX2K it happens, FL2K it happens, and we are so much more eager to buy a ticket for those and to want to bring our friends and family to those because they get to see wow, he's actually racing on a big stage. versus I can go do the same thing at a test and tune, same speed, same pass, and it's that much less exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's think about the best example that I've seen probably this season was Cleetus and Cars paired with the NHRA divisional race in Indianapolis. Because that went both ways. Like, not only do all the streetcar takeover guys get to race and be around, Tony Stewart was there racing Top Alcohol Dragster. Like, there's some guilty by association for the streetcar guys where they're there and they're getting to be around all these like die-hard, high-level NHRA drag racers. But they also, for the first time, are getting to race in front of this huge freaking crowd that shows up because Cleetus is on the property. And that was like, I had more people reach out to me talking about that event than probably any sportsman drag racing happening so far this year. And there's been a lot of great events, a lot of big money bracket races, but I continued to get feedback on that one. And it was almost all pointed towards, man, I got, we rolled up for the first round of qualifying or first round of eliminations and that place was packed. And that has, if I had $1 for every time I've had somebody tell me a racing story about the time they went to so-and-so's place and people were everywhere, like that's the memory that we want to make for people. And I mean, my goodness, that's such a huge part of our sport, but it only exists in a handful of places.
And I was at that event and it was actually really awesome because I felt like it was showing some of those guys that are in my mind a little stuck in their ways.
Yes.
This is what we do. Maybe there's no one in the stands. This is still how we do it. This is what we win. It kind of forced them to like see some of the shenanigans, you could say, going on. That kind of like, you need a little gimmicks to get people to the track.
You do.
You need gimmicks. You need to make it interesting. I don't fault any track for gimmicks. I feel like some of them don't want to be cheesy.
Right.
And they worry about that. But like, you got to get them to the track. It's fine. Use a gimmick.
However you've got to get them there is, I think it's completely irrelevant. Like if you can get people there, if it is cheesy, if it is a gimmick, whatever, like whatever you have to do to get people to the drag strip, I encourage you to do it. Like if that's, Norwalk is another track that does a fantastic job with ticket promotion and ticket distribution. Like they're one of the only tracks that draw a huge crowd for their sportsman NHRA race, their divisional race, which typically are poorly attended. They're participant driven. But they have a fantastic ticket distribution program and they do bring in all sorts of stuff and they put on this huge show and this huge production and that's what gets people there. And then you can find other ways to get them hooked and get them to come back, hopefully. But yeah, putting on a show is a huge part of it. And I think you're right. Cleetus and that whole operation, all you guys, Streetcar Takeover, showing them that, hey, there's a lot of different ways to do this. I mean, I think, I don't know who said it, but like the most dangerous words in the English language, because that's how we've always done it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, and that's true. And I think that a lot of things in drag racing have just been rinse and repeat, don't fix what's not broken. But times are changing. I mean, honestly, that's 100% the catalyst for our new race, the Skag Power Equipment Pro Superstar Shootout that's coming up in February. We want to create a modern event. Yeah. I use examples like the Barbie movie. The Barbie movie, like I've got a 9-year-old daughter, so the Barbie movie was like a big piece of my life, right?
You had to dress up in your pink.
Exactly. I'm the best. I'm not quite Ken, but I'm trying, right? But that movie is just a silly rom-com kind of silly movie. It's formulaic. They're all the same, right? Most all these movies, the hero's journey, they call it. You're a storyteller, you're a video guy. It's a very simple format. The movie wasn't what it was everything around the movie. It was the girls' night out. It's everybody dressing up. It's, I'm gonna wear a dress, my husband's gonna wear denim, or all of my girls from high school or all my friends from back when we were in elementary school, we're all gonna go. They did such a good job of making going to the movies an event, right? It wasn't, and it had very little to do with the movie. It was everything else, the pop-ups, the Instagrammable little things that they were throwing throughout these movie theaters. And that's how I feel about drag racing. Like our on-track product is bad to the bone, needs no improvement. I mean, I think our on-track product, as far as motorsports is concerned, far surpasses every other form of motorsports. There's nothing, in my opinion, plays to the short attention span of our culture at this point in time. There's built-in intermissions. Like there's some things, we spend so much time talking about what our sport's not, that we kind of fail to realize all that it is. And this is the on-track product is badass, but we need more of that I mean, and whether it's gimmicks, music, Ferris wheels, food trucks, vendors, pop-up shops, I don't care. We just need all that other stuff, all the things that go around it to take it from a race to an event. And I think there's a lot of drag races happening in the country, but I think there's only a handful of drag racing events.
Yeah, because the on-track product is not enough in the last 5 years to completely always fill the stands at every event. You can have the best on-track product, but people still want to go there. You're competing with like wives and kids, what they want to do. So if the wives and kids don't want to go there, the dad, as much as he loves drag racing, he's not going to be in those stands.
100%.
That kind of where it comes down to. And you look at Night of Fire, and it's kids through the whole thing. I love seeing that event because it's just packed, and all of those jet car drivers and those programs do such a good job at like setting up, bringing people in, showing them what's going on. Like they have like a really traveling show, like a circus in a way, instead of just like, don't talk to me, I'm here to work on my engine, which some people do. And I hate that.
And I couldn't agree more, to be honest, Cooper. It's like, I don't know. There's a culture change that's going to have to happen. Like, and it's weird because it's happening in pockets right now. Like these things are happening already, but it's just starting to trickle out or permeate out into other parts of our sport that are a little more like focused on what happens on the track. I mean, we're like so hung up over an oil down or something that causes some sort of delay on the track. And I'm going, hey man, that should be the opportunity to like roll out your other thing, your other entertainment. Like we were literally spent an hour this morning, like strategizing, like, okay, whenever you run like Top Fuel and Funny Car, oil or an explosion or something, it's almost a foregone conclusion. Like you don't want that to happen, and knock on wood, it won't, but you have to be ready for it. And so we spent a considerable amount of time going, okay, how in the case of some sort of extended downtime, our team, how can we make it when it happens? How can we make sure that that's not a moan and groan moment for our fans that are in attendance? Like, let's find a way, whether that's stand-up comics, music, giveaways, discounts at the concession stand, whatever you've got to do.
Yeah, some kind of stunt show would be cool.
Yeah, right? I mean, I love that type of stuff, to be honest. And that's the stuff that, you know, you sit there and watch the hardcore drag racing stuff, but your kid remembers the guy who did a backflip on the dirt bike.
Yeah.
You know, that type of thing. We need more of that in this space. And it's kind of crazy because I've been having these conversations like in the magazine, online, podcast and everything for what seems like 100 years. But in a really short amount of time, like all this chicken scratch on legal pads for 20 years, it's like starting to happen. Yeah. So it's kind of an amazing thing, really.
Yeah, so like you've been kind of beating this drum for a while, and now as it all starts to come to a pass where everybody's starting to realize what you've been telling people for a while, you're kind of like, you know, doomsday warning these people, like it's coming, like you have to start doing a little more or else you're not going to fill your stands, your track's going to get shut down, all this stuff. It's kind of really starting to come to a pass now, and you're not doing the I told you so, you're doing the listen now.
Yeah, well, and it's like
you
maybe
didn't listen before, listen now.
And even the tracks, like I had a guy ask me like, what are you going to do if this? I want to be solving problems like before they are one. I mean, the NHRA is like kind of who everybody loves to use as an example and pick on typically. And they set the standard in our sport without question. And they do so many things so incredibly well. And like they started the season with like a string of 4, 5, 6 sellout crowds. I mean, tens of thousands of people buying expensive tickets to go to the drag strip. So like they don't have a crisis on their hands or anything, but we've got to get ahead of it, right? Like because times are a changing, right? I heard Bob Dylan say, and we've got to be righting that ship before it becomes an issue. Because I feel like, I don't know what your opinion is on like the state of affairs in drag racing. We actually just put out for about a decade now, every fall we do the Drag Illustrated State of Drag special issue. And it's a special issue of the magazine. And it kind of like, it crosses over to our website, and everything we do kind of goes back to taking the temperature of the sport of drag racing, identifying trends, identifying difference makers, people that are making significant contributions to the sport of drag racing. And I'm telling you, man, right now, by all accounts, we've had some tumultuous things happen this year, right? Some track closures, but even some of the tracks that have gotten closed down or supposedly closed down are coming back. Like there's a couple of tracks that have been announced as going away that I'm led to believe will be used next season for drag racing. So I personally feel this is a high time for our sport. I mean, there is more people. There was almost 1,000 race cars at the NHRA US Nationals alone last weekend. There was 400 cars at the YellowBullet.com Nationals in Cecil County, Maryland last weekend. Not to mention wherever Justin and Chase were with Streetcar Takeover and whatever. I mean, there's 400 drag strips, over 400 drag strips.
50 back of the track things going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. I mean, if you call around, chassis shops are backed up.
Yep.
Everybody's busy. And I just really feel like this is a high tide moment for our sport, and we need to be making moves and doing big things right now while we have all this momentum. Like, God knows Street Outlaw, no matter how anybody feels about Street Outlaws and No Prep Kings, that deal has 1,000% moved the needle for drag racing in a great way.
I personally really like that event. I think that they're doing important things for drag racing. People like to make fun of the drivers. Do it. That's what you honestly should be. I compare them to the WWE and what Vince McMahon did, and he was filling stands, and people loved it. There was drama. Like, fine, do it.
Let's do it. Yeah, I mean, you gave me goosebumps because that's the example. The way I likened it, especially with our event that we do here in March, the World Series of Pro Mod, I said this during our drivers meeting. If Sam Corcus and the guys at Street Outlaw No Prep Kings are Vince McMahon in the WWE, I want to be Dana White in the UFC. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's the same but different. You know what I mean?
They live together.
They live together. Matter of fact, they're owned by the same company now, right?
The same facilities.
Same facilities. And I do think they're doing a different thing, but a very, very important thing. I mean, the people that I see at those events are fans of drivers. It has very little to do with the cars. I mean, of course, the cars. There's some cars that have taken on identities, right? Yep. I mean, Farm Truck, The Crow, Murder Nova.
But they'll all have new cars next year in No Prep Kings, and they'll still be fans. Those fans will still be showing up, whether you have a new persona that you made or like it's a new car. It doesn't matter. They'll still show up, and they still want to see that same action of like.
They want to see that guy they have a connection with, or like you said, the guy they hate. Yep. I mean, because that's as big of a part of it as anything, where it's like a lot of these folks, they get a lot of personal satisfaction out of their disdain for whomever. Doc, they hate him, or they hate this guy. That's what drives them. And if that's what it takes, I mean, so be it. Who are we to make them, doesn't have to all be positive. WWE, black hats and white hats, baby faces and heels. Yep. I mean, it's part of the storyline. So I'm cool with it, man. And that was honestly, if I go way back to 2005, whenever we were cooking up the idea to start Drag Illustrated, that's what it was about. I mean, I said that exact same thing. All these guys that we want to write stories about, they're going to have a new car next year. What if they get a new sponsor? They're going to have a new paint scheme. And our mission from day one was to put faces to the names on the windows. I couldn't count how many racers I knew of. I knew their car, but I couldn't point them out of a crowd. I didn't know what they sounded like. I didn't know what their life was like. I didn't know their story. And we made it our mission on day one. Like, I think we've put out 185 roughly issues of Drag Illustrated magazine. Probably 10 of them haven't had a human face on the cover. And that's been by design. Yeah. Because I don't want cars doing burnouts and wheelies on the cover of the magazine. There's plenty of places to see that stuff. I want to tell the stories of the men and women that make this sport what it is, make this sport so special. And I truly feel by celebrating those folks, we will grow and build the sport of drag racing. We'll ensure the people that are here stay here and hopefully attract new interest, because we're making rock stars out of these people and heroes, and not being laser focused on the car that they may wreck or sell or repaint or whatever else. Yep. And that it has served us well. I mean, nearly 20 years in, being focused, a very sharp focus on telling the stories of these people has really made all the difference for what we do. And I don't know. I think that is something that's the magic of Street Outlaws. I mean, it's not about racing. It's about personalities. It's about drama. It's about storylines. And that's what like traditional drag racing lacks. And now some of that we can't have, because of just the way they do things and a controlled cast. Yep. But I do believe there are pieces of that we can borrow and apply to more traditional styles of drag racing, and I think we're going to be surprised with the results. Well, that's why people will even they'll latch onto a driver, and he may be in bracket racing right now, but you end up following that driver
up until he's in a top fuel car at some point, because you'll follow him in any kind of, or her in any step that they take, and sometimes they go in crazy freaking directions because there's so many under this umbrella. I've talked about the peak of drag racing. I don't think we have a peak. I think it's an umbrella, and we all kind of do what we want to do. I want to be in a door car that can drive on the street. Yeah. I don't care about being in something on nitromethane. It just doesn't really
resonate or
doesn't really pique
reason.
my interest. So it's like we all kind of have our spots we want to be in. Somebody like Alex Laughlin, who's driven everything under the sun. The same fan base follows him through each different car, and that's cool.
I agree, man. And I think that I tell this story sometimes where, like, have you ever been driving down the road and seen like in loving memory of number 3, Dale Earnhardt, in the back glass of like a Toyota truck or a Ford truck? And anybody that follows NASCAR or knows anything about Dale Earnhardt knows that he was a Chevy man. Dale drove a Chevy, but seeing that logo, that sticker in the back glass.
Peel it off.
Yeah, I mean, Dale Earnhardt would roll over in his grave if he saw number 3 on a Toyota or a Ford. Yeah. But what that tells me is that person driving that Toyota or Ford truck, they didn't have a connection to a Chevy, a 358 small block Chevy with a 4-speed transmission that makes 800 horsepower with a 4-barrel carburetor. They don't even know. They have no idea. What they were attracted to, the connection they had, was with the Intimidator, the sunglasses, the mustache, the Wranglers, the bad attitude. They had fallen in love with that person. And I think that, I mean, honestly, the original slogan of the NHRA was, "Where the cars are the stars." And it has clearly served them well for a long time, 70 years of success. But I do think times are changing. And going back to the magazine example, you don't pick up Rolling Stone and see drum sets and guitars. You don't pick up Sports Illustrated and see baseball bats and footballs. You see the people that use those things, the people that play with those things. And that's kind of been really our mission since we started, was to have a laser focus on the people, because I think that is how we grow.
Yeah, the people in the sport are what makes it grow, and people show up to talk to their favorite driver. You see kids lined up around the corner just to see their favorite drivers and talk to them, and they don't care as much about the car as long as it makes some noise. And you know, when they start it up, you see some fuel kind of come out of the exhaust, and you feel like you're like, you get that VHT smell and the burnout smell when you show up at the track, and that's my favorite part. Shoot, I show up there just to hang out on a Thursday night because I can smell see Wade spraying up and down. Smell
some glue, that juicy fruit smell. I love that smell. It's the same. But you've had a front row seat to the Cletus McFarland situation, this whole phenomena, and it is crazy. He is a meaningful celebrity, and people, I mean, and he's got like 70 different cars that he races, but he's Cletus no matter what he's driving. And I think that we need more characters like that. I mean, we have a handful in drag racing, but really, I mean, I think the most probably visible characters at the highest levels of drag racing are John Force, and that's kind of its own problem, is that here this guy is awesome and he's a great ambassador for our sport, but he's 70-something years old, and it's really hard to bridge that gap to you or to the YouTube generation when the guy that you're sticking the camera on the most or putting a mic in the hands of the most is like an older guy, you know, and that's no disrespect. He can still do it. He's still winning races, setting records.
He'll always be a legend.
Always be a legend. I think he's the greatest of all time, or he's definitely in the conversation. But we need new characters, and I think we need new events and new ways to develop those characters and put them in front of people. And that's kind of our mission, really, with everything we're doing at Drag Illustrated, whether it's these races down here, other programs we do, it's all rooted in celebrating these people and trying to build stars.
I even had a worse one than that, because at least he's still racing. I had somebody comment on my post the other day when me and Victor were talking about heroes in drag racing, and they were like, "What do you mean? You have Don Garlits right by you?" I'm like, "But when was the last time Don Garlits filled a stage, like filled the stands?" I was like, "He's a legend forever," but like, I mean, you got to talk about who's getting people to buy tickets.
1,000%. And I talked about this on our podcast a couple of weeks ago. I get frustrated sometimes. I understand why it happens, but as a sport, and maybe that's not fair because of what people like you are doing and many others, thank God, but we are like we look at yesteryear, like we're so caught up in what used to be and how things used to be. And it just seems like every time I turn around, it's like legends this and blast from the past this and all this effort looking back at what happened. And we have to preserve that. Right? We have to preserve our sports rich history and all these traditions, no doubt. But if we would put that much time and energy, I mean, I can't count how many videos there are on YouTube of drag racing yesteryear. Like there are, I don't know this off the top of my head, but I would be willing to bet that there are more videos that have been produced on behalf of drag racing or by some drag racing person, media entity or whatever, looking back at Don the Snake Prudhomme and Tom McEwen's rivalry or Don Garlitz or Shirley Muldowney or all these, Warren Johnson, Bob Glidden, all this stuff that happened a long time ago. I guarantee you there's way more of that than like, hey, here's the new up and coming guy that's out racing right now, that's winning championships and winning races and setting records. Like if we would put that much emphasis on the star and on building new stars, maybe we wouldn't have our main star be a 70-year-old.
There almost needs to be some like masterclass training, maybe it could happen at PRI, of like how to make yourself on social media be known and liked by the people. Yeah. I'm sure there could be a better way to package that. Maybe stop being like, it's get tough. Out of your own way a little bit.
It's really hard. I actually wrote a book that's on Amazon called Tell Your Story. Mm-hmm. And it's an ebook. I need to update it. I wrote it like several years ago. I think I wrote it in like 2016, 16, 17. Anyways.
Some different social media now.
Different social media, but the story is kind of the same in that one of my favorite quotes from Guy Kawasaki goes, if you don't toot your own horn, you can't complain when there's no music. And I sometimes have to like say that to people twice, especially in our community. Like drag racing these people are the salt of the earth. I literally consider like this entire community my extended family. And I've got like lifelong friendships, lifelong relationships that were established and maintained in the sport of drag racing. And this group of people are blue collar, they're hardworking, they're do-it-yourselfers, and they're not great self-promoters. And because they're so humble, they don't want to be boisterous, they don't want to be egotistical.
You have to be narcissistic to put yourself out on the internet all the time, to film yourself and think someone might want to watch it. You have to be narcissistic. If 10 years ago, if you wanted to put yourself out there, some TV producer had to find you and been like, you're good enough, and that gave you that self-validation that was like from somewhere else. But now you have to be validating of yourself to put yourself.
And that's hard, right?
Hard.
I mean, you're doing it here. I mean, we just did like, I think our 315th episode of my show. And I tell people stories about early on. I mean, it took every ounce of like courage that I had to hit record again or hit go live again. And especially like with the comment sections and the things like that, it's hard. It's extremely difficult. But with the tools that exist now, I mean, you're exactly right. Like we looked at the industry a few years ago and basically, I mean, if you think about it, how much has happened in such a short amount of time, but you're right. You used to be a drag racer that wanted to make it or like build a brand or become a well-known person in the industry. You were almost 100% reliant on an ESPN aiming a camera at you or Fox Sports aiming a camera at you. You had no control over it. Well, now, I mean, if you've got an iPhone or if you've got a phone in your pocket, you've got everything you need to engage an audience and build a following, but it is hard, and it's the putting yourself out there that people struggle with. And I think anytime I get an opportunity to talk to a racer that's bashful or like, oh man, yeah, we did set that record and outrun everybody by a 10th, but I want to let the scoreboards do the talk. And it's like, well, scoreboard's not on social. Yeah. You know what I mean? Scoreboard's not doing podcasts. Like you're gonna have to find a way to take what happens on that scoreboard or take what happens on that drag strip and make sure the masses know about it and share that with the masses somehow, some way. And I think people get mixed up on like being humble. Like humility, it's not thinking less of yourself. It's putting yourself behind others, right? So like being humble isn't not being proud about setting a world record or winning a race, whether it's an NHRA national event or your local, shootout at Jerkwater Dragway or whatever. Being proud of that doesn't make you a boisterous jerk or some obnoxious loudmouth. I mean, when you want to be humble, open a door for a lady, help someone cross the street, help someone. That's how you demonstrate those character traits. But a lot of people get those things mixed up. And I really found out the hard way. Like my first job in drag racing was managing, you maybe have been there, a little 8th mile drag strip in Southeast Iowa, Eddyville Raceway Park. No. Okay, there's a little 8th mile drag strip just about, 60 miles into Iowa, something like, no, not even that. It's like 30 miles into Iowa from the north border in Missouri. Anyways, it was like my local track. I grew up racing there almost every weekend with my dad and my uncles. It's like, it was our home away from home. And in 2005, I got an opportunity to take over as the general manager of this track right prior to launching Drag Illustrated. Anyways, I had put on a ton of races, did all this stuff there, and I was like constantly, and this is kind of on the cusp of the digital revolution. Like you've got social's not a thing, but you've got websites are becoming more and more prominent. Forums are huge. And I was really like devastated that I couldn't get any media attention in drag racing even. Like I wasn't surprised that like the local news stations weren't giving us any love, and I wasn't surprised that like I didn't expect
But who were you
CNN
even hunting for at that time?
Well, back then, believe it or not, when we started Drag Illustrated, there was about 10 other drag racing magazines, right? So I mean, you had like NHRA had National Dragster, IHRA had Drag Review, NMCA had Fastest Street Car, NMRA had Race Pages. There was 2 or 3 independent titles, one of which was Drag Racer, Drag Racing Action, RPM Magazine. There was a handful of others, but then there was also CompetitionPlus.com, DragRacingOnline.com, a handful of other sites, and I remember being so frustrated because those sites and web magazines were like part of my life. You know, I read them every month, I went to them every day, and I would put on this, like, I remember we brought like outlaw style heads up drag racing to the Midwest. We were one of the first tracks like north of I-70 to put on like a real deal pro mod, outlaw 10.5, limited street and drag radial. And it was a big deal. It was a big deal in the Midwest. And I was just devastated that I couldn't get anybody to cover the races. Like, oh my gosh, there's all this drag racing media. None of you, like, I can't get a page. I can't get a picture. I can't get a mention. And I actually talked to the editor of DragRacingOnline.com, a guy named Jeff Burke. Anyways, he's kind of very well known in the drag racing media space. But he goes, Wes, man, in this day and age, I can't. I don't have like writers to send all over the world. Like I can't, but if you send me, if you will tell me, if you send it to me, we'll publish it. And I thought, really? Like that's all I got to do? And he's like, and it's like, it was that narcissistic part. Yeah. I wanted someone else to come take pictures, write a story, validate me. Yeah. But what ended up happening was I hung up with him and I thought, well, shoot, I can write a story. And I sat down at my laptop, banged out a 600-700 word race report, sent him a half dozen photos, and guess what was on the website the next day? Yep. This shootout series from Eddyville Raceway Park. And I thought, well, shoot, that was easy. And telling that story and like reminding people, you got to take matters into your own hands. You can't wait for that outside source. You can't wait for me to call. You can't wait for you to call or whomever else.
I deal with the same thing on this podcast. I'm looking for interesting people. And I don't know everyone. Yeah. I don't know every interesting person. They need to come to me a little bit, which, it may sound a little weird, but I want to highlight people that are doing interesting things. So some people might have to message me. I'm pretty receptive. Email me. It's pretty easy. And I'm sure you guys, it's pretty easy to, send something in and like bring awareness to something that you may not have realized.
1,000%.
You're not everywhere.
No. I mean, and it's like, I tell folks all the time, like we try hard. We keep our ear to the ground. We're paying attention. Yeah. We try hard to know everything that's going on, but we just can't. We can't know it all. We don't know every, awesome human being or like you said, interesting person that exists in our space. And if they would put some effort into coming to us a little bit, God only knows what would happen. I've started telling people like every week on our podcast, like, hey, send me an email, like send it to the magazine, press@dragillustrated.com. Wes, send it. If you have, we'll publish it. More than likely, unless it is terrible, more than likely we're going to publish it. And you've got to, and we don't publish everything. There's no doubt we don't publish everything. However, you've got a way better chance. Right? What is George say? You miss every shot you don't take. Yep. Like if you don't send me that press release or if you don't even tell me what happened this weekend, there's no way you're very unlikely that we're going to do it for you. You know?
You can't sit at home and expect to get discovered, and you can't even go to the track and make your pass. You can make the world record pass, but if you don't tell anybody that was your world record, for the most part, they don't know because there's so many, not even just micro records. I mean, there is a lot of micro records, but people still cover those.
Absolutely, man. I mean, and it's like, there's the other thing that we contend with, especially like from an advertising perspective and stuff. When I talk to like new businesses or upstart businesses, they want to like wait till they're like, everything's perfect to start telling their story. Like, well, hey, let's wait till we got some guys out winning races. Let's wait till we got some world records to our credit. Let's wait till this happens or that happens. Like, no. This grind that you're on, this hard part right now, that's the relatable part of this story. Like whenever you're winning all the time, that's not that relatable. But whenever you're having some sort of struggle and you're fighting the good fight, like tens of thousands of other racers are as well, that's when you can get some buy-in and get some people excited about what you're doing because you're like them, right? So it's tough. I think that there's some pro teams that early on, I used to get like a press release from some pro race team, and it would be XYZ driver suffers, disappointing first round loss. And I would think to myself, like, man, I don't even know if I would have sent that if I lost in the first round, I don't even know if I'm sending that, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But in this world, there's so much news and there's so much noise. Everything's a story. Any opportunity for content, good, bad, or otherwise, you got to go. You got to find a way. I mean, I don't know this for a fact. You probably do, but I mean, I'm sure some of your best performing videos are like when things don't go to plan.
Always.
Right?
People love that.
Yeah.
But in drag racing, you can't really have a plan, unfortunately.
Yeah.
My plans are make it to the starting line is my main plan, and anything else after that is just kind of details.
Yeah. Icing on the cake. If it goes beyond that, it's all gravy.
There's a great quote. It's planning is useless, but plans are useless, but planning is essential.
100%.
It's kind of how it has to work. You have to plan, but it's a useless plan anyways.
It really is. The other one that I like is everybody's got to plan until they get punched in the face, right? And we see it in drag racing. I always feel like I can learn a lot about a driver, especially like a young, like early in the process driver, how they handle adversity, right? Because drag racing looks kind of easy and simple to the untrained eye as it is, but it's quite challenging. But those drivers they show their worth when things go awry, right? The car won't start right behind the water box, or it won't, fight through those moments. There was an instance this past weekend at the NHRA US Nationals that I thought was like exceptionally impactful. Matt Hartford was in the Pro Stock final against Fernando Quadra Jr. And these are like naturally aspirated, 1,400-ish horsepower, manually shifted, clutch operated, arguably the most difficult cars to drive in all of drag racing. Definitely in the conversation. Very detail oriented. Pulls up to do the burnout. This is in the final at the biggest drag race of the year, right? This is like a career-defining moment, potentially.
Yep. Cover of magazines.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big deal, right? Yeah. You win Indy, you've really done something. And you can pretty much hang it up after that. Matt rolls into the water box and just out of the water and revs it up, lets out the clutch, and it drives through the clutch, right? The tire doesn't spin, right? Muffs the burnout. And I think to myself, they're screwed. It's not always, it doesn't always affect the run. It's probably not going to make as good of a run as it would have made. Those things have little bitty 6-inch clutches in them, so they're delicate. But nonetheless, he literally like just backed up. This is the final round, place is packed. It's on Fox. I mean, this whole thing backs up, rolls through the water, tires are wet, rolls forward, does another burnout, backs up, calm and cool, cuts a killer light, wins the race. And it's like, that's a good race car driver. Yep. The guy that can deal with the screw up, deal with the slip up, and still go through and do his job, leave on time, hit his shift points, win the race.
Didn't get in his own head. He was able to kind of fight through, and that's when it's the toughest between the water box and the staging. When something goes wrong there and you're out of your process, like people have like a step-by-step process.
100%.
Like, shoot, I had a fly flying around my car one time I was in there, and I was like, oh no, it's gonna ruin my process.
Yeah, I mean, in that process is everything to a drag racer, like that consistent order of events. And when you're able to have it get broken, have that sequence get screwed up somehow, some way, and recover, I think that's what like separates the men from the boys, personally.
And I think it's arguably the most exciting for the fans to see the staging. The staging can be so make or break of excitement, and we want to see a little excitement. Like, there was one time at FL2K, 2 street cars were sitting there for 3-4 minutes before they wouldn't go in.
That's awesome.
And Victor loved it. A lot of track owners would be like, I saw it at World Cup. granted he had to because curfew was coming.
Right.
He backed the 2 cars up and he said, "You both lost." But
really?
curfew was right around the corner.
It's tough. It's context matters, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think Jason Miller, they do such a great job with that event. Oh my gosh.
That event.
I mean, it may be.
He doesn't let me race, but I still like it.
It may be the biggest independent event in our space, one of for sure. I mean, it's incredible what they've done. But yeah, I mean, but I'm with Victor. Like, we're sitting there until these things spontaneously combust or whatever's going to happen, because that's. I mean, I'm a fan at the end of the day. Like, I think they're in drag racing and honestly car culture as a whole. I think people kind of struggle to identify as fans because it's not like cool to be a fan.
Yeah.
It's cool to be a race car driver. It's cool to be a guy that like builds stuff, or cool to be a guy that works to a tuner, right? It's not as fashionable to be a fan. And I feel like that's something that we've got to change in our space. Like, we have to make it okay to be a fan. And like, in that moment, I'm a fan. If I'm standing on the starting line and these guys won't stage and we've got some sort of epic staging battle going on, I'm going, this is what I'm here for. This is what I want to see, and I'm gonna let it go. Like,
fired up, the announcer's going crazy at that point, because hopefully you have an announcer that's good enough to identify that and like capitalize on it and get the people, like everybody, no matter where you're at. If you're standing in line at concessions, now you run up to the fence and you're watching it. That's the kind of stuff that like people will go home and tell that story, and they'd be like, "Who won?" Yeah, I don't even know.
Exactly, man.
It was just a good staging battle.
It really, those are the things. And I got invited to go to the Music City Grand Prix in Nashville a few weeks ago. It was an IndyCar race in downtown Nashville, and I've never been to an IndyCar race, so I was kind of excited to go. And I really wanted to just see how they did it. You know, it was a street race, so it wove through kind of downtown Nashville and around. And it was so funny. Like, the way I outlined the experience is, it was like 100 degrees in the shade. My wife and I are sweating through our socks. It's miserable. We're in Nashville, so it's okay. Tons. I think we walked 18,000 steps on Saturday. So we are worn slick.
It's pretty hilly city.
Pretty hilly. I mean, it was gnarly, right? But my experience at the IndyCar race, like, I don't know what the purse was. I don't know what a good lap time is. I don't know who qualified number one. I don't know who won. I can't really even name an IndyCar driver. Like, maybe one. Graham Rahal, because he's married to a drag racer, Courtney Force. But like, I don't know any of those people. I have no knowledge. The amount of racing I watched was like 2 or 3 Indy cars zipping by me at like 150 miles an hour. So zoom, zoom, zoom. That was about all the racing that I got to see. All that said, I can't wait to do it again. And it was because of all the stuff around the racing, right? Like, your example was like the staging, but it was like, that is like just a micro. Nobody remembers who won. They remember how they felt. They remember that incredible staging duel. Or like, I remember we got to see Flo Rida, and I'm like, oh, Flo Rida's at the IndyCar race. This is kind of cool, you know? But I mean, they just did such a good job. Like, I hate to like throw stones, and I'll probably get in trouble for this, but like, drag racing puts IndyCar racing to shame. Like, as far as the on-track product, it's not even on the same planet. But IndyCar puts drag racing to shame with the production and the vibe and the event feel. Yeah. You didn't need to see any racing to feel like you had a great time.
And those drivers, you think of them as celebrities.
Yes.
When you see their drivers walking around in Indy, they're in their whatever specialty suit that they wear that's not their same race suit, because it's all fancy stuff they got, but like, they feel like they're on a pedestal, which to a fan, you kind of want that in a way. Like, you want to look at those guys like they're bigger than life.
You know, I thought about this the other day, and it's kind of weird. Drag racing, one of our sport's biggest selling points is the open pits. Like, every ticket's a pit pass. Every ticket's a pit pass. And I think that's great, but I also wonder if it's almost like, it's counterintuitive, right? Like, I think that's a fantastic notion, but it kind of removes some of that you're talking about. Putting these drivers up on a pedestal and treating them with reverence. Yeah. But whenever anybody can walk up and grab the dude by the shirt, I think you lose a little bit of that. It's a double-edged sword, right? It's leading edge, bleeding edge. I don't know. I could go either way on it, but I do think we can make an effort as a sport to just put our drivers on a pedestal more often than we do, and create opportunities for them to get that special treatment, to get that, kind of ooh and ah moment, even if they're kind of manufactured, right? Like even if you don't want to change the dynamic of drag racing and start charging to get to the pits, that'd be a bad idea. I'm not saying do that, but maybe just create more opportunities where it's like, oh, that's the drivers. The drivers are only over there. Things like that.
Even if you just did something like carting them around on a specialty like tram, even if they're not going anywhere, it just makes them look like, oh wow, they get this like special treatment.
I mean, I think about going to like an and I'm not I don't want to name them, but like any drag race, right? Like any modern drag racing event, you'll see like the number one qualifier on Saturday night, like walking to the tower to go do his interview or whatever, and he's like by himself, alone in the dark, fire suit at half mast, I always say, like hanging off of him, and I'm like, shouldn't we have him on like in a Cadillac or something or on a golf cart that's like nice and he's sitting on the back not being bothered, because that's freaking Ron Capps. Nobody talks to him, right? Like this guy's a famous race car driver, but nope, he's bebopping up to the tower by himself, to go take care of all that. And I'm going, some of it is just recognizing if you're in business in 2023, you're in show business, whether you like it or not. Like, we may not be in Hollywood, but we are 100% in show business, and all of us to varying degrees, right? Some more so than others. You're 100% in Hollywood, right? Cletus, 100% in Hollywood. You guys are in show business. But these race promoters, these race tracks, even businesses in our space, you got to be putting on a show at all times. Like I think about Apple. They're putting on a show with their packaging, with their stores, right? The way their customer service works, all that. Everybody wearing the same shirt in the store, the wood tables in the store. All of that is showmanship.
You can fake prestige a lot.
Yes.
You can just kind of like fluff the prestige of it a whole lot, and that works. It works for all of us. We all get bought into the exceptional level of prestige that's there. I mean, shoot, sometimes I'm there at an event standing in line for a burger in my race suit.
Yeah, exactly. And and that's some of the things, and we won't be able to like solve all these problems overnight, but I do feel it feels like in drag racing, and you're like part of this new movement, right? This youthful movement that exists in our sport. Like I used to feel like I was the young guy, and now I'm not, and it sucks, and I get sad about it. But there's a movement happening for sure, and I don't think we're going to fix all these things overnight, like I said. But I do think if we can have conversations, this is what's lacked. There had not previously been a place for these type of conversations that other people can participate in or chime in on or share. I mean, prior to the internet, YouTube, et cetera, it was like message boards, right? But those were like cult-like in some ways, and it was a very narrow focus. But we need to have conversations about our sport, not to like pick it apart, but like be secure enough in who we are as a community, who we are as a sport, whatever you want to label it, like who we are under this umbrella. We know who we are, and we don't need to be bashful about it, but we have to be willing to take a hard look at things and try to change with the times. And we can't just continue. Nobody likes change. I don't, but it's necessary. We have to evolve or die, right? And I think our sport of drag racing, we're having there's a jump off moment happening, in my opinion, where this evolution is going to start to happen really fast.
And that's what I worry about with NHRA is I know they just had, last year, they had the biggest Gator Nationals ever.
Yeah.
I was told all about that, and I was like, okay, it's awesome. I'm happy to see that. What are the ages of the people in there? What is the average age of, I don't know. I'm guessing. I would assume it's older. I don't know how many young people are. It definitely skews older.
I think they would argue with you. I know they would. But, and there's definitely, I think the crowd, it's more youthful than you think, but it's definitely an aging demo. I mean, you don't have to look very hard to like go to one of those races and you see a lot of gray beards, you know what I mean? A lot of older folk. Matter of fact, I had a guy tell me this past weekend at the U.S. Nationals in Indy, which was a monumental success, but like, hey, they're going to need to start to consider making this event more accessible for older folks. because there's so many older folks there that can't make the hike to the top, that need a place to park their scooter or, you know, their cane or whatever the case may be. And I know that's
always really far.
Yeah. I mean, and there's some real truth to that. But I mean, I think you're right. I mean, our sport is built on the back of like generational enthusiasts. Like my grandpa was a car guy. Yeah. My dad was a car guy. I'm a car guy. I hope my children are car guys and gals. And so like, there's a part of that I think we should be proud of, but the biggest example that I got was last year. It might have, all these things run together. I'm not great with dates, but there was like a 2-week period. Since I live in Texas, I get to go to the racetrack more often. So they're everywhere. But at the Texas Motorplex outside Dallas, there was like a 2-week period where they had the NHRA Fall Nationals, and then 2 weeks later they had NPK, No Prep Kings rolls into town, and it was stunning. The stark, like I'm sure there was crossover, but I couldn't identify them. I mean, I'm telling you, these were different groups of people. And at the NHRA race, it was hardcores. It was like the older gentleman, older wife, or middle-aged, right? And you certainly saw kids, but you saw guys with tattoos and NHRA on their arm. And like, this was a hardcore group. 2 weeks later at MPK, it's like, young husband, wife, 2 kids. You know, you just saw a lot more youth there. You saw entire families there. People that were there, like I wasn't like polling the crowd or anything, but I would just walk around and like talk to people and interact with folks. That's kind of part of what I try to do when I go to anybody's event, is just see what kind of time people are having, see what kind of experience they're having.
You're trying to play to a specific audience, so you have to know your audience.
You got to know them, you know? And it was so funny how many of them told me, we just came out for the day. And that they're not here to see the race end. They don't probably care who wins. Maybe they care who wins, but like they're here for a couple of hours to see some burnouts, hear some loud cars or whatever, see some stuff that looks fast. I mean, hell, at those races, there aren't any times on the board, so you don't even know if they are fast. Yeah, right.
There's no win light.
There's just a win light, and it's weird because you go back the 2 weeks prior to the NHRA national event, man, and it's like all about the numbers on the scoreboard, and it's all about who wins and who loses and what the points, and it's like it's like almost too hardcore for its own good, right? And no, it's a very interesting thing. And like the Gator Nationals the last couple of years have just been, I've been told that the Gator Nationals this year was probably the largest crowd that's ever been at a drag race.
That's what I've heard, yeah.
Like probably the largest crowd in drag racing history.
Any drag race. That's freaking crazy to hear. Even like No Prep Kings, they were in Australia. They shipped their cars to Australia. That's crazy. I had Justin Swanstrom on the other day, and I was like, do you think the show is relying on you guys, or you guys on the TV show? Like, could one,
what did he say?
Could one like be without the other? Because I'm worried like networks do crazy things. And he was like not worried about it at all. He's like, I don't see this going anywhere. And I'm like, man, but like I feel like the networks are so, like they're so tough. You don't know what they're thinking. There's 10 suits up above that show.
I think Justin's probably doing the best job of that entire group of building his own thing while simultaneously taking full advantage of the opportunity that's in front of him. Because he is trying to build his own thing, right? Yeah. He's got the merch stuff going. He's active on social. He's got a hardcore following. I think he has an OnlyFans or something.
Yeah, he's touching on every fan that is interested in him. He is getting to them.
But I don't think there are many people on that show that are doing that though, right? Like
we talked about that. I told him, I was like, you should teach some of these other people, like, this might not last forever, guys. You got to build something on your own.
100%. Like, because it's that thing of, I used to always say, like, early on in my business, I would have people, well, actually, there's a couple stories here. But the takeaway, I will shortcut it, is that don't build a house on borrowed land. Right. And I think that's what a lot of people do, like by being reliant on one thing. Like I'm putting all my eggs in the YouTube basket, or I'm putting all my eggs in the Facebook basket. I remember like early, like right after and right before Facebook went public, when everybody's pages were growing. Like I remember this has been like in 2009 or something, before Facebook became a publicly traded company and it was still private. Like we went from like 9,000 fans to 100,000 fans in like 3 months. Yeah. You know, it was insane. there were businesses built on the back of that, right? Like, oh, we got this crazy exposure and anything we post goes viral, like it's insane. And we're going to drive traffic and we're making money on click through.
Ad articles were really high at that point.
Right. And it's like, then that goes away and the business is upside down and on fire overnight. And I think that like what Justin's not doing is he's not building a house on borrowed ground. He's bought his own property, right? And he's taking full advantage of some of these platforms, but he's still maintaining control. He's still touching people, like you said, through a lot of different platforms. And I think it's crazy smart. But when I look at that situation, or if I was asked that question, who would Andre the Giant be and Hulk Hogan be without Vince McMahon? I mean, I'm sure they would have had some level of success, but would they have been these larger than life superstars? I mean, without Vince McMahon, in WWE, I don't think so, right? Like they probably would have had some level of success for sure, but you have to have that circus master guy. You have to have that ringleader, promoter, whatever you want to call it. And Sam Corcus and that gang, like they know what they're doing. They're building stars. And I thought about that Australia deal. Like that's a victory for our entire sport. Yeah. The fact that this sport and all of us under this umbrella, I mean, it's hard for me to wrap my head around. You know the logistics. Like it's hard to get your junk to BMP from here and it's 10 miles. Yeah. But like let alone get your stuff loaded up in a container, shipped across the ocean. Like the effort that takes, the dollars that takes is, we should all be so proud of that opportunity existed in drag. That drag racing created an opportunity for some dudes from America to ship their cars across the ocean and race in other countries. Like that is, and people bought tickets to go watch them do it.
And they were filling up stands in a different country. That is unreal.
I mean, we should all be walking around with a little pep in our step and our chest puffed out. That happened, that drag racing. I mean, I know I feel that like anytime I go to Indy, I keep referencing Indy, but there's this part of Indy, I'm sure you've been in Brownsburg, where all the race shops are. I go there and I am inspired by that. Like I feel proud that drag racing provided that guy or gal or whomever it is an opportunity to like have this multi-million-dollar race facility, have 2 tractor trailers, employ 15, 20, 50 people, whatever. John Force Racing has hundreds of employees. Like I'm proud of that. Like I'm so proud of this sport. And I think that we've kind of got to act the part a little bit. It's like that whole act as if. I think we've spent so much time in drag racing at every level kind of feeling like we play second fiddle or we're on the back burner compared to every other motorsport, right? But we've got to start walking around with like this sport is significant right now. It really, really is.
Yeah, there's a lot of people I've listened to where they like, if you take yourself more seriously, you will be taken more seriously. Like the guy that wears a suit all the time, he just gets taken more seriously in things. If you have a car with a bunch of stickers on it, looks like a sponsored vehicle, like it's assumed to be more of like a program than just like you just showed up to the track, drove it there or whatever. But as long as it looks the part, it can fit in anywhere.
I couldn't agree more, man. I mean, it's like, I remember it was so funny. Whenever we first started the magazine, I was going to the Winter Nationals in Pomona, California. Like literally didn't have a ticket to the race, didn't have a parking pass, didn't have a media credential, nothing. Used my mom's credit card to book a plane ticket, flew across the country, rented a car, which I had to pay like $1,000 for because I wasn't over 25, right? Rental cars are crazy for young people, and which is something that we need to like band together and drive force change. But anyways, I remember flying all the way out there, and it was like that moment of going out there was a terrifying experience for me. And at the time I had a partner in the magazine, and I remember asking him, he was a little bit older than I was, a little wiser, more worldly. And I go, what do you think I should like wear? And he goes, smell like money. Just look like money. And it was good advice because it was like, all right, you know what I'm going to wear a nice polo, and I'm going to tuck my shirt in, I'm going to wear decent shoes, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to look like I mean business. And even though I didn't have a credential, I had to pay to get in, I had to pay to park, no special treatment. I was taking pictures from the grandstands. I made relationships that weekend all those years ago, almost 2 decades ago, that are still a part of my life today. And I think that I took it seriously and people took me seriously because of it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. I mean, even with like, I tell everybody, I'm like, the same deal with building people is like, you have to be across platforms to go to the YouTube side of things. I know so many people that race and they don't post anything on YouTube, the largest search engine in the world.
Right.
It's Google. It's the largest search engine in the world. They just post maybe once on Instagram every, 5 weeks of their car. And like, I don't know, there's just so much back to the self-promotion and self-building yourself there's so lack of that. And I would love to teach people, shake them a little bit and be like, your sponsors will be happy. Yeah. Like, I promise you, this is what your sponsors want. Talk about their products a little bit. Like, you have to do that kind of stuff, because even when you may get Flow Racing to come up and talk to you after your pass, but you might not be able to really articulate what you need to talk about well enough in that time. And Flow Racing does a great job with what they do. And I know you guys have a pretty close relationship with them. They've upgraded a lot.
Yeah, very quickly. And I saw that. I was actually at their headquarters a couple of weeks ago in Austin, Texas, and I was like blown away by the scale of that business. Like, to be honest, they're so new to race, or at least drag racing. They've had a foothold. They've had a massive presence in like dirt track racing for a while now, but that business was built on the back of like track meets, wrestling meets, like less underserved sports is basically their business model, is giving world-class service and world-class visibility to underserved sports. And when I got there and saw that there's like 400 people that work there, they've got this badass building. It's like 2 floors of this high rise in downtown. And it's like a legit company, and they are making big moves in drag racing. They've massively upgraded their production, bringing on new people, experimenting with new technologies. It's an exciting thing, and we're lucky to have them in the space right now, as far as I'm concerned. I'm curious, and I don't mean to like ask you questions.
No,
but
live it up.
How much of a struggle was it for you, like, to put yourself out there? Because like, it is hard. And I think like that class you're talking about, or coaching people up on that, it would be of significant value to this group of people.
I mean, shoot, I would go to any place right now and teach whatever I have to know. And it's always that same deal. Like, I feel like I don't know anything. But then if I talk to somebody, I'm like, oh, actually I can. I have learned a pretty good amount in 10 years of being on YouTube and social media.
And constantly putting yourself in front of people and dealing. I think what I see, like, I'm down here with a handful of NHRA pro level drivers today. We're doing a site visit at BMP for some planning for next year. And I even see them like struggle. Like, these are people that are world champions in front of the camera quite frequently on television, do all this stuff, but like struggling to deal with trolls on the internet, struggling to deal with the comment section, struggling to deal with perception, or what people, how have you, like, what, did you just like have thick skin like all your life? Or?
Oh yeah, I was born with thick skin. In high school, I had a teacher that would tell me, don't throw stones if you live in a glass house. She told me this a lot. So I don't know what that meant.
Yeah.
But my always thought was like, I'm going to keep throwing stones, but I'll have a better house, I guess.
Yeah. I mean,
I had to just
with the consequences.
handle it. Yeah. I was like, so what do I just hide in my house? Like, what is the option here? You got to throw stones sometimes, or else nobody cares really about you at all.
Good point, man. I remember the first time, my first like foray into video was I started doing selfie video interviews like at the racetrack, and it was like, and it took off, right? This was like pre going live, pre most of the podcasts that exist in our space currently. And I remember, I tell this story, but it's so funny. I actually built up the courage to do it at SEMA in, I don't know when it was, 2000. Whatever, let's just say like 2000, a long time ago, right? I can go, all right, I know these people need to be on camera. There's tons of these racers that have a story to share, have an exciting or interesting perspective that I want to get on camera. I want to show people what I'm experiencing at these events that I go to. So I'm going to just start shooting these selfie videos. So I shoot the first one. Hey gang, Westbuck here, Drag Illustrated Magazine. I'm on the floor of the 2000 whatever PR or SEMA show in Las Vegas, spin around or whatever, and do this video. And in the moment, I was like pretty proud of it. And then I made the fatal mistake of pressing play and watching it. And I'm like, oh my God, my nose is huge. My skin looks terrible. The lighting's horrible. I sound kind of weird. And I deleted it. And that prolonged so many things, because it took me a year, dude, to build up the courage to try it again
Yeah.
a year later. And it was funny, but I had to put systems in place. Like I went to Valdosta, Georgia, South Georgia Motorsports Park for Donald Long's Lights Out. It might've been like Lights Out 7, I think. Anyways, and I knew, okay, I want to do these selfie interviews. I know this is going to work, but I've got to put some systems or structures in place to make sure that I do it. So the first one was, I'm not going to watch them. I'm going to live with the consequences. Like, I'm not going to look at I'm just going to send it and live with whatever happens. Maybe it'll be well received, maybe it won't, but I'm not, if I drop the camera, I'm going to pick it up and keep going. If I cuss, I'm going to keep going. If I stumble, if I butcher somebody's name, I'm going to keep going. I'm just going to film them. I'm not going to watch them. I'm going to post them. And I also, started to try to like the low hanging fruit of like familiar faces. Like before I got there, I told like a handful of people my idea, like, here's what I want to do. I haven't seen anybody do this in our space. So I want to do it. I feel it's going to, I'm 1000% confident it's going to work, but I need some buddies to participate so that I can go like get warmed up to do this. And that's ultimately what I did. And from there, I went on to do like literally thousands of those interviews, but like, that it was so hard. I mean, like I said, it took me a year to build it up the courage again. And even then, I think it was like 11 o'clock in the morning, and I like went to a buddy's toter home and took a shot of vodka before I went and filmed the first one, because I was just to loosen up a little bit, because I was so like, what are people going to think? Am I wearing the right thing? I don't know. And is the audio going to be good? There's generators running and burnouts and all this stuff. But, you know, looking back, none of that mattered at all, and people loved it. And I actually think what we kind of come to find out eventually was, at least I think production value and expectations have changed. But back then, it was like the rougher the videos were, the more people seemed to like them. Like they were more real, maybe. They seemed less, they didn't seem scripted. They didn't seem like bought and paid for advertisements. It was just like voyeuristic, and people seemed to like it, you know? I
think people still enjoy that. That's why, like, when we sat down, I told you this is just a hangout. We're just hanging out. We're talking anything, really. I don't want to read questions and you answer them and then go right to the next one, like just like a rhino, just like, oh, just ignore that next thing. And it's just raw, uncut stuff. And it's just like normal human interaction instead of like this, oh, yeah, you know, like I did really good because of my clutch sponsored by who and my this because of that guy. And like,
we get enough of that.
You're like, okay, so was this like, is he reading a teleprompter right now?
Is this a promo? I think we're shooting a promo. Are we shooting a promo?
I can't stand that stuff. So you doing those is like showing like the real like side of these racers. And that's what people want to see. Everybody wants to see a human interaction. And that's what you get at the racetrack. I mean, these racers are kind of sailors in a lot of ways too. They curse like it. They live like it.
Yeah,
you live in a toter home.
It's a circus out there. I mean, it really is. It's like this carnival type of deal and a largely Carney kind of lifestyle. I mean, it's lots of hot lobby bars and fast food and all that. And like, why shy away from it? Why try to be something that we're not? And I don't know. I do think like the expectation of production value in our space has changed with all these influencers and the level of equipment that is accessible at this point in time. But I'm here for a quick and dirty, loosey-goosey type of deal.
Use your iPhone, man. They're so good. I tell people all the time, people have asked me throughout the last 10 years, how do you get into YouTube? And I'm like, well, your first video is going to suck. And so is your next 10.
Yeah.
But nobody's going to watch them. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But your 15th may be good. Yeah. It may be decent. If I look back on a video from last year, I don't enjoy it of myself. And I've been doing it for years. They're going to suck. You just have to own that and keep pushing on. But nobody's going to watch shitty content anyways, so you're fine.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to worry about it. No one's going to see it. Yeah, and it's so true. Like, just say it. Just shoot the video. Just post it, whatever. And especially, like I said, with the tools that exist for us today, some of these racers that are like electrifying personalities, crazy talented. I hate to say it, but like it falls on their shoulders because there's a pathway. There's plenty of people that have proven it. There's a pathway to build an audience, ultimately monetize that audience. Like, you know, find a way to be selling them merch, having them support you. They want to.
Yep. Your sponsors enjoy it more.
1000%. And it's cool. And it's for me, it's been neat because it's like the our parents, our teachers, the icon, they show us the way, but it's like kind of happening differently in drag racing, where it's the youth that's really showing us the way. It's these young people that are showing us new ways to do things, new ways to look at things. And that's exciting, because those are the kind of people that I relate to the most and I connect with the most. Like I like going to streetcar events, and like those are my people. You know, people that are there. There's not $100,000 up for grabs. They're racing for a plaque, and they took time off work, and the only help they have here is their girlfriend, who doesn't know a spark plug from a torque converter. Like,
my wife will hold the camera. That's about it.
Yeah, man. I mean, but like, those are the people that, like you said, ultimately end up, you know, getting a really good job or starting a business and buying a pro mod team or buying a top dragster or like a high-end, high profile, you know, a serious drag car. So it's, I don't know. I think that it's probably one of the most important spaces that exist in our sport.
People don't even realize too, like with me, for instance, I was, end of last year, I went to World Street Nationals at Orlando.
Yeah.
And it was midnight there. I was by myself. I was at the top end of Orlando. Everybody had left. I was going into final round. I was legitimately alone. I didn't know a single person at the event anymore, because everybody had left at that point. It's midnight. Nobody's, you know, unless you're still racing, you're
gone. Yeah.
And I pulled up by myself. Nobody else was there. I got gapped, but it happens.
But I mean, like that story, like
John Sears was the only one I think I knew.
Yeah, he's a good one to know.
Yeah.
John Sears, shout out John Sears. But that moment exists for like so many people, that like loading up late at night and you can't see the ramps on your trailer very well. And like, that's where our sport, that's the heart and soul of this whole thing. The people that aren't getting paid to do it, that aren't racing for some crazy amount of money. Like those are, and it's near and dear to my heart to like take care of those people, celebrate them. Don't make them feel like that experience you talked about right when we started is so true. I can't count the number of streetcar or like entry-level racers that show up to the track. That's an intimidating experience, especially you go to these big facilities or you go to an event that's got a bunch of hardcore racers. This sport kind of sometimes eats its young, you know, and it's really easy to go and get a bad taste in your mouth. Like the staff treats you a little rough. You stage with the back tires.
Yeah.
You've never done that. You know, it's an intimidating thing. Like that space between the water and the starting line, all the feels, all the emotions, right? And it's we've got to find a way to encourage people, you know, and nurture that, or like support them through that experience early on when you're screwing up and, you know, things aren't going very well. We got to keep them going. You know? I hope
that people understand when I'm at the track, I'm pretty open book. If you've never been to the track before and you roll up with your car, you can come ask me. I'm not an intimidating person. Sometimes when I'm at the track, I'm all sweaty and I look pretty intimidating. Right. But I try to tell people in these videos, that's just a look that I end up having. As a drag racer, it's kind of just normal. We kind of look like that.
Yeah, well worn, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're out in the hot sun all day. But if you come up and if you go up to some drag racer and you're like, hey, it's my first time, I've never been down the track, they're probably going to be ecstatic to teach you. They're going to show you some ropes a little bit here.
Yes, they're going to try to help you, man. I mean, and that's...
don't do it at a big event.
Right. Or maybe don't do it like right before they run. Context matters, you know, be mindful.
I mean, don't show up at a big event either as like, oh, this is my first time.
Right, yeah.
Get a little test and tune under your belt.
Yeah, because I had a guy tell me that, and it made a great point. I was at that aforementioned IndyCar race, and we were just talking about drag racing and all these different things, and this gentleman I was talking to was... the CEO of one of the road race organizations that were there. And he goes, drag racing, man, you guys play such a critical role in motorsports. And I was kind of thinking, well, I didn't expect him to say that. And he said, it's the gateway to motorsports. Like no matter where you end up, whether it's outlaw sprint cars or late model or road racing, whatever, most people find their way into motorsports by way of the drag strip because it's the most accessible. Like I was actually at an open house doing an appearance, which is still so weird to say out loud, at Cruz Pedregon, a nitro funny car racer in Indy a couple weeks ago. And the kid sitting next to me, he races 410 sprint cars, like at a high level and successful. And I said, hey man, so how'd you get into sprint car racing? Like, is that what your family did? And he goes, no man, I actually started out junior dragster racing. and it was just a reminder, like it was an example of that. It really is in many ways. I mean, you can race these things at a really young age. You can get involved at a really young age. The NHRA has got the program where if you're like 15, you can go race with a passenger in the car on the drag strip. You can, and then like those local test and tunes, like we could take the rental car to BMP tonight and run the test and tune with no issue. And that's, you can't do that in any other. I can't take my
for like $20.
For $20, I can't take my rental car and enter it in a demo derby, not without busting all the windows out of it. And you know what I mean? Like I can't take it and enter it in a late model race. I can't take it and go motocross racing, but I can surely go run the high school class or trophy class or test and tune. So the sport, it's important that it remains healthy, because I think all of motorsports is rocking and rolling right now. Like Formula One is like exploding. NASCAR feels like it's having like a little bit of a moment right now, kind of coming back around. IndyCar doing really well. I mean, it feels like a good time.
I look at things like Formula Drift a lot too. I like FD. I like what they do. They really highlight the drivers really good. It's not like, oh, it's a Nissan 240SX again. It's like, this is so-and-so, and he's like this and this, and they tell you the stats, and they are very blessed because they have a announcer that's been doing it for the last 15 years with them since they started.
So it's like he
knows everything, man. Jared he really knows. So it's like he can really incite the people. Like he can really like bring some value, but they do a good job at that exact thing of driver showcasing. The events are very fun for people to go and enjoy. Yeah. Driver meet and greets are constantly scheduled, which is pretty important as well. NHRA does a good job at that, I feel.
They do, for sure.
No Prep Kings, I think they do a good job at the driver showcase and the meet and greets and stuff. It's just tough, man. I hope 10 years from now, I got a son on the way in December. I want him to be able to drag race. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, that'll be the best thing that ever happens to you. My kids are the best thing that ever happened to me. But it's like...
He's lucky, though, because I didn't step foot on a drag strip till I was 19, 20 years old.
Really?
I didn't know. I didn't really know what drag racing was because I grew up on a beach community and nobody cared about that at all.
Yeah, no, who could blame them? Yeah, who could blame them? If you grow up on the beach, I don't know that I can blame you. But it's like, it's weird because my story is different. Like I was in my mother's womb at the drag strip a week before I was born. This is all I've ever done my entire life, and it's honestly all I've ever cared to do. I mean, it's what my family did. It's how we spent time together. It was actually part of our business. My dad runs an auto repair shop, so it was like tied to our business. It was our entire life, our entire existence, and always has been. My kids, despite my involvement in the sport of drag racing, like I don't go to the races very often as a racer. Like I'll take my Camaro and like go to streetcar nights and stuff like that. But I've kind of, to be honest, I've tabled some of my own racing desires to build a business. Like I feel like I've got a purpose, and it's to bring racers together. I like putting on events. That's what I'm passionate about, and telling the stories of racers. So I've kind of tabled some of my own racing desires, but I look at my kids and they don't spend as much time at the racetrack as their dad did. Like they go to the races that we put on, but I don't drag them to every event that I go to. I'm not there with my own motorhome and all that type of stuff. I'm not there racing my own car. I'm there conducting business. I'm in meetings all day, doing all that type of thing. And so it's not a fun environment for them, but it's weird because at least my son, he's 15, he's kind of finding his own way into car culture, which I think's been interesting because I've tried to force it. You know what I mean? I've done what dads do, and it's like, hey, buddy, we're going to go to the drag races this weekend.
Worried about that exact thing.
Yeah, we're going whether you like it or not. You know, we're going
drift away from sometimes what you're pushed towards. So I'm worried. I'm like, am I going to push him towards drag racing, and he's going to hate it?
And I didn't want to do that. I'm cool with, there's plenty of people that are pushed towards things, and sometimes they need to be pushed towards things. But I just, like, the way we do things in my house is it's like, I wanted them to want it. Like, if my son showed interest, I would pour fuel on that fire like that. But I'm also not going to, like, shove a square peg in a round hole. Like, if he is just not into it, I'm not going to force the issue. Hopefully it happens, but that's the point I'm making is he's 15, and it's been like video games and Netflix that have, he fell in love with the Netflix Formula One documentary. He starts watching that. And so all of a sudden, We're not talking about drag racing, but we're talking about racing. We're talking about cars.
Competition.
Talking about competition. And that becomes, and so now he's a huge Formula One fan. Well, then he gets into Formula One gaming. Well, now he wants a steering wheel. Now he wants pedals. So now we're getting like a little simulator thing going. And now he's super serious about this racing and whatnot. And then we actually partnered with it's called No Limit Drag Racing 2.0. It's an iPhone game. And I got him going on that, and all of a sudden we started having conversations about 60-foot times and reaction times, and how his car runs and how much horsepower it makes. And he's a smart kid, and he's a kind of a numbers guru, to be honest. I wish I had that, but anyways, here he comes. Like, it's taken a different path, but here he is becoming a car guy. So now anytime we're driving around, like, he identifies, he's big into like European cars and stuff like that. The Formula One thing's rubbing off on him. I said, like, hey, don't get their budget, because they operate on a different budget than we do. But
be careful.
Be careful. But still, I mean, it's cool to think that we're driving down the road and he's identifying, oh, that's a Z01 Camaro. Oh, that's a base model Corvette. Oh, that's a 911. He's into it. And I think I'll get him all the way into like hardcore drag racing, and hopefully at some point driving a car or being involved in a meaningful way. But it's just interesting because his pathway to that is going to have been way different than mine. And I think you just have to trust that some of you is going to rub off on them to some extent. And, I know plenty of kids though that had a miserable junior dragster experience. Their parents made them do it.
Yeah. We're
going junior dragster racing. And as soon as you start making anybody do anything, it's tough.
Well, I don't like baseball as a kid.
Yeah.
As an adult.
Same. I mean, my dad made me play baseball.
Yeah.
And I still am mad. I'm still pissed.
Oh, it was not enjoyable. I never enjoyed going out to the baseball field, when I was 12 years old, and it was the most slow-moving game ever.
Same.
And to this day, and I can see why junior dragsters, but that TV show, Drive to Survive, I think was a pivotal moment in Formula One as well. I think they made that sport 10x with that Netflix series, and I don't think they realized that was going to happen, but I talked to so many people that are now big on Formula One because of that TV show, and it's crazy. I like to look at things like that as like a case study.
Yeah,
of
same.
Like, how do you translate some of that? How do you take 1% of that and translate it into
I think drag racing, I mean, I've been saying, like, my thing always goes back to, I do this, in my opinion, drag racing we need a reality show. Like, that's what that is. And it's complementary, but it's a star builder, right? It's something that builds the stars in this space. And you need good toys. That's the thing, like Monster Jam. The tickets that they sell.
I love looking at what they do.
It's unbelievable. Another incredible case study. The racing is ho-hum, right? The freestyling stuff is really cool, and it's awe-inspiring and all that, but they've built their fan base on the back of 1/64th and 1/24 scale toys. Like, that's how they set the hook. And if you go to Walmart right now, we can walk up and down the aisle and you're not going to find any like badass drag racing toys. You're just really not. You might
see Gravedigger.
Yeah, but you're going to see Gravedigger.
Yeah.
It's unavoidable. And I think about things like that. And the other example I use all the time is like, look what UFC achieved on the back of the Ultimate Fighter. Like, that deal was on the ropes, struggling, all but going to go out of business. And they have one like viral moment in the finale of the original, the Ultimate Fighter show. It becomes this, I mean, now there's like some cosmic things happening. Like, they had this crazy main event and it's this 5-round war or whatever. And it's a crazy thing, but that wouldn't have happened without the reality show that was building up these storylines all throughout the year. And that's what I feel like drag racing needs more. Like, we need better toys, we need a better video game, and we need a reality show. Like, those three things could completely change our world as a sport. I
honestly think, though, UFC's in a similar boat where they're scrambling for people that are like big names. Like, they had like Conor McGregor, and he was such a name.
They're struggling with stars right now.
I think they're really struggling for stars. I think they need it. I think all of their stars are aging. and they're like, who's the next one? And then like anytime somebody may be the next one, he just gets his lights out and he's
like they're drunk on this guy, Sugar Sean O'Malley.
Yep.
But I understand it. Like people get mad because they're talking about him getting like, what do they call it? Like UFC Dana White privilege, I think is what it was. And it's like, yeah, they're looking for those guys. They're looking for these polarizing figures that have some sort of persona that transcend the sport, that they go beyond just hardcore fight fans, because people like him because he's flashy and he's got big opinions, he's got pink hair and he's wearing the chains and tattoos. He's got like a whole look and a thing about him that draws people in, whether they love him or hate him. And you're right. I mean, I've even experienced that. I used to be the ultimate UFC. I loved UFC. Every month we'd like get friends together and watch the UFC pay-per-view. I think they also they kind of like saturated the market. I mean, it used to be you could get your buddies together like once a month maybe and watch a fight. But now there's like one on Friday night, Saturday night, then Wednesday night. Yep. Like there's so much, it's hard to keep up with. But you're 1,000% correct that it was, early on it was like Randy Couture and Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz and Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre and BJ Penn and the Diaz brothers. And then there was like this new era of Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor. And you can see this kind of stalemate moment from the the UFC, where they don't have a transcendent star.
I think it went right down once Ronda Rousey got knocked out.
Yeah.
I think
you could almost like feel the wind going out of their sails as she fell to the canvas.
Yeah. I know. I think, what was it, Holly Holmes?
Yeah, kicked her in the head, man.
Yep. I think that was like that moment where like, oh, we don't have like a big star that's just going to come out here and constantly win. I mean, even in boxing, there's only like a handful of names that will go down in the history books of like
absolutely
mainstream nomenclature of like, those names. Everybody will always know Tyson, Mayweather, and
Ali, George Foreman. But you go beyond that. I mean, and look at the most significant characters in boxing today are YouTubers.
Yeah.
Like Logan Paul and Jake Paul, without KSI, like they are, in my opinion, single-handedly responsible for the resurgence that's happening in boxing, right? I don't want to like take everything away from like Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder and these like real classically trained long-term boxers that have earned it, right? Earned the millions of dollars, earned the titles and all of that. But those 2 or 3 guys pretty much alone have put this sport back on the map. And like, what's that say for the conversation we just had? Like, they're not the best boxers. Matter of fact, it could be argued that none of them are very good at it. But they've got all the others. They've got all those intangibles. They've got that willingness to be narcissistic, willingness to put themselves out there, willingness to be ridiculed, willingness to have a perspective and stick to it. And they're like reaping the reward of being that. And that, I think that exists in drag racing. I mean, there's some of the best stories and the biggest personalities are guys that haven't won a ton of championships, haven't won a ton of races. But we've got to like separate. It doesn't have to be either or. You know what I mean? Like you can be a guy that hasn't won a bunch of races and still be very relevant. Like these guys, I mean, I don't know what happens with Jake Paul, his future in boxing, but he has forever changed the landscape there.
I will say he does seem to punch pretty hard. He seems to have a lot of striking power.
He has a lot. He clearly has a lot of power because he is like sleeping people.
He may not be the best on his feet and moving around, but if he nails a strike on you, it's going to be a hard hit.
It's going to be rough. No, I mean, and that, but like I said, how can you? It's just the power of building a following and being polarizing. Like I can't tell if I like Jake Paul or hate him. Like from one minute to the next, I'm like I'll see him wear something and I'm like, all right, this dude's cool. It's like this guy's got it. And say something that's like really insightful. But then I'll see him post something on Twitter or whatever. I'm like, okay, I don't know if I can totally get on board with this, but I appreciate what they mean. And I think to your point about just like using all this stuff that's happening around us as case studies. Like we may not be able to apply every single thing that the YouTube boxing movement or the Formula One Netflix doc series, or we may not be able to pick and pull a little bit, right? And be willing to try some things. I mean, that's one thing, no matter what happens with our events, whatever happens in the future, like I'm proud of the fact that we swung the bat. Yeah. We have never been hesitant to try something. We've never been hesitant to stick our neck out and take a chance and live with the consequences. And I honestly think that whatever success my group of people has had in our events or whatever, I think it's been rooted in just being willing to try.
So I talked to somebody the other day that you might find this interesting. I was talking to him. He's building a very large following, and he told me he wants to race in NASCAR at some point. That's his goal. He doesn't race right now, but he said that it is currently more important to build your following and then become a racer as it is to become a racer and then get into NASCAR.
Wow.
Like, that was kind of his thought. I was like, I never really thought, I thought like
the Pauls are the example,
young.
right?
Yeah.
The Pauls are proof. Like, they built such a enormous following that now they can just do whatever they want. If Jake Paul went on YouTube and said, you know what, I think I want to run in the Daytona 500 next spring, he'd have a ride.
Travis Pastrana is a great example of that.
He'd have a ride. He would have a ride. They would come out of the woodwork.
And he did great.
Yeah, man, they would come out of the woodwork to put those guys, put that guy in a car. And I mean, Cletus, I think, is in that. I mean, he gets calls all the time like, hey, you want to come drive my rally car? Hey, you want to drive my stadium truck? Hey, you want to drive my monster truck? Once the audience gets so big, what is like Gary Vee always talking about? Like, it's all about attention. How much attention can you garner?
But for the first time ever, there's a different avenue to become a Top Fuel funny car driver if that's your goal. You don't have to be the child prodigy of started when he was 8 years old. Like, there's actually a different avenue there, which is so crazy that you can actually just do that.
I hadn't thought of it, but you're 1,000% right. I mean, he's right. I mean, it's probably more important for him to become an internet celebrity or an influencer than it is for him to go-kart racing.
Because there's a million kids right now that could probably drive in NASCAR, but they're probably never going to get a seat, unfortunately. And you have to, you're good. You have to give NASCAR a reason to put you in the seat.
Oh my goodness, yeah. It's about time for a drink, eh?
Yeah. Man, this is freaking fun. Dude, there's so much interesting stuff we didn't even touch on. We hardly even talked about, like, any kind of, like, racing of, like, small tire, big tire. People like to make fun of the big floppy stupid tires that everybody likes to make fun of. But I think they're making a resurgence now.
Are you a radial guy? Like, how do you classify? How do you identify? Are you a radial guy or a small tire guy or a big tire guy?
I'm a radial guy, but I am self-aware enough to not like tractors all day, not like watching tractors all day. I don't like vampire racing, as Donald Long calls it.
Yep.
And I don't enjoy he spun the tires, he's just done. Like, I don't enjoy that where I watched one event last year, and every like 5 pairs, one car would spin the tires, one car would get down. And that was the race. And I was just so tuned out of that. And I felt so bad. I was like, why am I so tuned out of this racing? And I was like, because
it's all or nothing. It's a really, in my opinion, kind of a weird thing. Like, I fancy myself, like, I love drag racing and I love it all. Like, I have an appreciation for literally every level and every different comp eliminator, stock, super stock, radial racing. Yeah, front wheel drive. We had them at our race. Like, I love it all, and I have an appreciation for all of it. But I definitely have my preferences. And early on, like, I've always been a street car guy. Like, that's what I've always personally raced. That's what I've always personally owned. I've always been like I want a car that I can go race, but I can also go to Sonic. I can go cruise around. I can go make a pull on the highway. I can throw my kids in it. My wife and I can take it to dinner. Like, I like fast street cars. So the radial tire movement, I was always, keen on it, a big hip to it or whatever, but it just felt like the evolution of that whole scene just happened so fast, right? And it was there, I think there were like a few landmark moments where the rules got opened up a little bit. Like, okay, car count started to go down, so what rule change can we make that'll increase participation? And it was kind of like sacrificing the integrity of what we're trying to do and the spirit of what we're trying to do in order to go faster, which, racers, we will find a way to ruin things typically. Like, we will keep pushing until it's completely ruined.
If it's not in the rules, it's going to be after this pass.
Absolutely. And I think that type of drag racing, it just got, for the longest time, it was like where the tire's the limiting factor. And I think that was a really romantic, that's an awesome notion. And it was for so long. Like the track was what it was, and the traction compound has changed a lot. Track prep, just the overall protocol has changed a ton in the last 10 years. And I think that the tire got so good. Like Mickey Thompson, like it was first the BF Goodwrench drag radial, then it was, Mickey Thompson comes out with their first drag radial, then it's the ET radial or whatever, the Radial Pro, and then the ET. It continued to improve.
On a 14-inch wide wheel
exactly.
with a 275.
Keeps getting better, keeps getting better, keeps getting better. And the next thing you know, we've got radial cars running high 340s in the 8th mile at 220 miles an hour. And it's so far from where its roots are as cars that still look like cars that are raced by regular people. I think it lost me somewhere along the way. I think the first radial race that we ever covered, the fastest radial cars were running like 490s, right? 5.0s. Like Orska Easy Street way back when. The fast cars ran high 4s. Fast cars in radial racing now run mid 3s. Like
you're not in the conversation in a 4-second radial car.
No, it's terrifying to think about how far it's come. And that happens. It's the curse of heads up drag racing. I don't think there's one way that you curtail that, but that deal, it just felt like it kept getting opened up and kept getting opened up. And I understand like Donald Long's reasoning for the way they did the rules for a long time and the way they did some of these things is because they wanted to increase participation. They wanted to keep pushing the envelope, cars going faster and faster and faster. Every year, a new record. There was a stretch there in like the late teens where every time there was a drag radial race, the record got reset, like every single one of them. And I think that's an unsustainable thing. Like it goes back to our whole deal is if your whole brand, the buzz around your event is built entirely on the back of records, like that's a race to the bottom. Like eventually you're going to get to a point where the cars aren't going much faster, gains are few and far between, and that's not enough alone to move the needle.
Records in those are also pretty subjective because it's a record within the rules.
Yeah.
So if the rule next year takes 25 pounds off your combo, then the previous record is kind of nothing.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
It's not like it's unlimited, anything goes on a radial, because God knows what that would be.
Right.
That would be
there's no telling.
Insane. And I think that's where we're at too, which is weird, is we're at this point where you have to limit the cars not by what they can do, by what you need them to do.
Yeah.
Where I feel like drag racing for the 10 years ago, 8 years ago, like it was what you were able to do was the fastest. Now we're slowing the cars down so much that it's almost not even attainable to slow the cars down that much.
And I think that's what so many places like that where heads up door slammer racing is happening. You have to be mindful of that. Like we experienced that. Like one of the things that we are the most proud of about the 2023 run-in of the Drag Illustrated World Series of Pro Mod was our rules, because we told people our rule package is about close competition. We have a variety of different power adders. We got nitrous cars, turbo cars, root style supercharged cars, screw type supercharged cars, and centrifugal supercharged type cars. So we have like 5 power adders that we have to manage.
Somehow get parity between
somehow create parity amongst them all. And if we run them all up to the ragged edge, we're not going to be able to achieve that. But if we pull them all back where they're all like, how fast do you really need the cars to go? Like we set a target ET. I told my tech team, John Sears, Lonnie Grimm, Mike Carpenter, Vic Alvarez, there was a slew of us involved in this conversation. And I remember telling them, I want number one qualifier to be like a 363, right around there. I want it to be like a mid to low 360 deal. And like 365 is kind of the target ET. There are literally probably over 100 cars in North America right now that can run that number. Well, there's way more than that actually.
Yeah.
But it's like there's a ton of cars we can choose from. If we target that ET, we can get all those combinations can run that ET in varying conditions. And that was how we built it. And we ended up having 32 cars spread between 600ths of a second.
Yeah.
The tightest field in pro modified history. And it's that, but we knew we weren't going to go in there and reset any records. Like, even though the conditions might have been there, our rule package wouldn't allow for it. But I wanted parity. amongst all these different people, and I wanted great racing. And that's what we ended up with. I mean, side by side run. It was unbelievable, the quality of the drag racing there, the polar opposite of what we see sometimes where one car makes a Hail Mary run and one doesn't make it a foot.
Well, then somebody comes in and throws a curveball at you with a twin turbo car.
Yes, and Mark Mickey has for sure done that. Most of our we're not going to have to make a ton of changes. We're going to have to make a couple of slight tweaks, but there's always that one combination that has promise, and as soon as somebody gets the ball on, bat on ball, it's going to be a problem.
And that's what drag racers do. If you see an opening to where you can maybe for at least one race or two races before they can kind of make the rules to get you, if you can get a leg up on people by just you're within the rules, but you're kind of in the gray area, racers will find that. They're very good at that.
Very much. I think it's funny because I don't think if you're not going to have a lot of success if you're not. It's like that whole Ric Flair saying, like, win if you can, lose if you have to, but no matter what, always cheat.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of a pro wrestling slogan, but the mindset is there. Like, you've got to look in the gray areas. You've got to find the places. You have to. You got to look for everywhere you can for an advantage. But long way to say that I just think that big tire racing is just, this, to me, Pro Modified is the universal language of drag racing. These are cars that still look like cars, big tires, wheelie bars, motor sticking out of the hood. They look like Hot Wheels. Like, it's successfully contested all around the world. I mean, they race Pro Mod successfully in Europe, Sweden, Germany, Russia, Australia, all over the Middle East.
Qatar has a big one.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Canada has a thriving Pro Modified scene. But by our count, we keep running totals. There's well over 200 high-level Pro Modified cars in North America alone right now.
There's probably another 100 in chassis shops getting finished up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we like to say that there's 600 or 700 of them on the planet.
Yeah.
And that's a huge inventory of cars, Oh,
Man.
Getting blown up here. I apologize.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Man, I love hearing about freaking drag race, and I'm just so excited to see the future. And I think a lot of people like to spout doom and gloom, but I think that's also a little bit of clickbaity tactics because I think we're in a good spot. As long as drag strips hold on and keep pushing and listen and watch what other people are doing and aren't afraid to maybe copy what somebody else is doing. Don't schedule on top of them. Take the rules, copy them a little bit, try to get some parity. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here.
Agreed, man. I think everything's a remix, right? Like
nothing new under the sun.
There's nothing new under the sun. And that's something that I've never been very bashful about. Like if I see some people down the street making millions selling lemonade, I'm not going to feel inclined to sell green tea raspberry lemonade. I'm just going to sell lemonade. Yeah. You know what I mean? I might price it more competitively, but I'm going to do what's working. And I think there's tons of examples in our industry right now of things that are working really well. I mean, Vic Alvarez and the team right down the road at Bradenton Motorsports Park are a great example. Tyler Crossnow and the guys at Virginia Motorsports. I mean, there's infinite examples. We got a new track being built in Kansas City. There's a lot of positive things happening in our sport, but it is going to take trying some new things. I think there's some examples out there. Like, I'm so blown away by what Streetcar Takeover has become. I mean, I remember that was like a car show in a parking lot in Kansas City, and now it's like a literal traveling event series from coast to coast. The blueprint is out there, but you got to pay attention. You got to try some things different. And I don't think you can just look at drag racing. Like, I used to kind of subscribe to, like, Lil Wayne used to always say that he only listened to his own music, like I'm a big hip hop guy. And I thought that was always funny because he didn't want to be like inspired. He didn't need that. Like, he had so much creativity, I guess, himself that he didn't need outside inspiration. But like the rest of us aren't so lucky, right? Maybe. And I feel the best ideas I have or the things that I get excited about almost always come on the heels of like stepping out of my comfort zone, going to the IndyCar race. I'm going to the NASCAR race at the Texas Motor Speedway in a couple weeks. I remember one of the most like transformative experiences of my life was going in 2007. I went to San Diego for the Red Bull Air races. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I still reference that event all these years later, the things I saw them do, the production, all these, the way they did ticketing, the way they handled their credentials, so well done. And I don't think, if I just kept steady going to the next drag race, kept steady doing, I don't think we would have I don't think we'd be where we were. I think we've had to like take those blinders off. There's a time and place for blinders, right? There's a time and place for nose to the grindstone. I'm 100% focused on what I'm doing. But I tell you what, man, they say you can tell if a kid is like how smart he is or like his IQ in a daycare environment by relocating things, because the observative kids, the kids that are observative, they're the ones that have an edge. They're the ones that are the smart kids notice things. And I think that applies to all of us too, right? Like be willing to look around, be observative, pay attention.
Our echo boxes of drag racing, and don't be so close-minded to everything. Build a burnout pit at your drag strip. I'm sure it'll attract a ton of new blood. I've told that to other drag owners. I don't own a drag strip, but I've told drag strip owners, hey, you should build a burnout pit. I bet you'd do really good.
I remember, it's so funny because I won't name names, but I wanted to do an Australian style skid pad like in 2008. And the track owner that I talked to was like, I ain't doing that to my pits. I'm not gonna, no way. Yeah. And I'm like, no, you've got this open area. There's not enough cars here. Like, this is huge over there. Like, if we could just start with street cars, eventually we'll have people building purpose-built ones, you know, but they looked at me like I had 3 heads because we're not gonna bring in Jersey barriers and destroy a portion of our pro parking and whatnot and have burnout marks everywhere.
We have 2 events a year here, man. We need these parking.
Right, you know, and it's like, I couldn't believe, and now you look at what, I mean, there's like a whole world, like an economy being built around people building burnout cars.
And a lot of other races around the country are adding them. A lot of other events, LS Fest is starting to add them. Yeah. Like they're starting to add them, where I always said this. I said, if there's 20 events a year, people will build cars for it. If there's 40 events a year, everybody's going to start building cars for it and putting up money, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, and you've got to have a lot of, I mean, this stuff's so expensive and so time consuming. If you can't make good use of it, I don't think people get excited about it. Yeah. I mean, you have those hardcores that are going to band together and throw a car together over the course of a year or whatever to use once. But most people, if they're going to put that much time and energy and money into something, by God, they want to use it. So it's an interesting time, man, but it really all boils down to like trying new things and providing value and recognizing that value can come in a multitude of different ways. It doesn't just have to be side-by-side drag racing and record-setting numbers on the scoreboard. You can find, like I said, I think the music component in Nashville, not surprising, that was the most impactful part of my whole IndyCar experience, is how well they weaved music. Everybody loves music, right? They weaved music into the event.
To a guy that has never listened to any music.
Well, yeah, most people. Yeah,
most normal humans.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. And it's like it's like the soundtrack of my life, just riding down the road in my dad's Suburban, going to the next race, listening to whatever, you know. And it was like just a part of my life for a long time. But you know, that was the takeaway from that event. It had nothing to do with the racing. The racing was this much of it. It was all the other stuff. And I see tons of promoters, they're out there. It's happening slowly but surely. And I genuinely believe drag racing is the great American motorsport. You can't tell me otherwise. And I believe that we are living in the golden age of drag racing. These are the glory days. Like not way back when. These are the glory days.
I freaking love that, man. Well, before we wrap it up, I want to quickly just talk about some dates for events that you guys have coming up at Bradenton specifically. You guys have a bunch coming up. I mean,
yeah, man, we have, so to kind of close out the year, we head to PRI at the end of the year, the first week, I think it's the second weekend in December, head back to Indy for the annual PRI show. We're bringing our party, the Drag Illustrated After Hours, back to Indy, so we'll be burning down downtown Indy. That deal has become...
30 deal you guys always do.
30 under 30. I just got a note this morning that we've already received more nominations in 7 days than we got all of last year. So we have, that number's over 2,000 nominations for 30 under 30. And if that doesn't make you feel good about drag racing, I don't know what will. I mean, that's 2,000, and I'm sure there's overlap, right? But I mean, these are, and what I'm so proud of with the 30 under 30, we've been doing this deal for about a decade. The honor it has become in this industry is, I'm so proud of it, right? That people care so much about it. Last year, we had 29 of the 30 kids that were in the 30 under 30 all traveled to Indy to come and be a part of the ceremony, get their jacket, because we get, my little shtick, I'll give it to you briefly, is that growing up as a racer, growing drag racing with my dad, like, I didn't get a letter jacket. You know what I mean? They didn't give out letter jackets for doing the clutch on your dad's pro stock car.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But I was frustrated because like even the band kids get a letter jacket. You know what I mean? Like what? You know, what's and I think young people in our space need that validation. I want them to feel like someone's paying attention and someone cares. So I thought we're going to do our own letter jackets. So we've been doing these custom jackets every year, and it's so cool to think that, I mean, we had a girl fly all the way from Finland to receive her jacket and walk across the stage. And it's like, that is so cool. And it's not just drivers.
I think Victor got one last year.
Yeah. Was it last year or 2 years ago? But like, I mean, it's track owners, it's media people, it's influencers, it's fabricators. One of the kids that were on the cover of the magazine last December, Damon Cole, he builds transmissions. That's what he does. He builds turbo 400s at M&M Transmission in Jefferson City, Missouri. In what world does Damon Cole end up on the cover of a magazine? Like, I'm so proud of that, right? I mean, this is a guy who works with his hands every day, goes to the racetrack, rebuilds turbo 400s, which is not glamorous, right? And I'm so proud that we were able to put him on a pedestal, like we were talking earlier, not just these drivers, but put many people of our industry. And it's not just NHRA people, it's not just NPK people, it's people from all walks of the racing life, man, woman. It's every race, creed, color. It's something that I'm super proud of. But anyways, that happens Friday at PRI. It's not hard to get a credential to the PRI show at this point in time. So if you want to be there, love to have you. Awesome show.
So many cool racers go there and do meet and greets at all your favorite events. I mean, PRI is one of the best places to go. Hands
down, one of the most significant happenings in our sport. And then, to your point, man, we are going to, I honestly think between February and early March in 2024, it's going to be the most exciting 30-day stretch in the history of drag racing. We kick off the 2024 season with the Skag Power Equipment Pro Superstar Shootout at Bradenton Motorsports Park. That's February 8th, 9th, and 10th, a 3-day event. Top Fuel, Funny Car, and Pro Stock do in battle for a total purse of $1.3 million. This is the highest payout professional drag race in the history of the world.
They're going to be wicking those things up.
I think we're going to see records set in each of those classes. I think we're going to see, and drivers, like, to our point about creating a unique environment, these are dudes that, like, $250,000 to win, winner take all. Like, this is going to be... You're going to see Brittany Force, Steve Torrance in an environment that they've never been in before. This is Nitro meets grudge racing, because it's different when it's, well, we didn't win the race, but we still earned a bunch of championship points and we still got a little bit of money for, no, you got to win this deal or you go home empty-handed. And that really changes the dynamic. So one session of qualifying on Thursday night under the lights. Everybody wants to see header flames, nitro cars at night. Friday is going to be probably the most action-packed day in drag racing history. 3 nitro sessions. These teams that's completely foreign to them. Most of the time, 2 runs a day is God's plenty. We're going to run them 3 times on Friday. And then Saturday, we're going to bring them out and find out who's who. We're going to draw names out of a hat. So we're going to find out who races who by chip draw. And then just 3 short weeks later, the Drag Illustrated World Series of Pro Mod rolls into Bradenton with $100,000 on the line for our invite-only field of Pro Mods. So, man, it's going to be a super, super fun start to 2024. I like to set the tone for the year. Like I always tell people, we're going to be the thermostat for the season, and we're going to set that bad boy at about 150.
That is lighting it on fire.
It is, sure. You know? So I'm genuinely excited, man, and I appreciate it. I think we could have talked for like 10 hours.
Oh, for sure. You're coming back on anytime. Okay. Anytime you're in this area.
Okay, let's plan on it. I mean, these guys are going to kill me if I don't show up and do my actual job, man.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate it, Cooper, more than you know, man, and I'm happy for you.
I'm glad that glad we got to do this.
Me too, man.
Thank you so much for coming on, and that was a blast, guys. Drag Illustrated everywhere on everywhere.
Yeah, Drag Illustrated on everything. DragIllustrated.com, at Drag Illustrated on all those different channels.
Wes Buck Show, he does it every 10 minutes, it feels like.
It feels that way myself, man.
I was looking back, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many of these.
Oh my gosh, we've done so many. It's honestly unbelievable, but we're blessed. Like I feel privilege and honor to get to do what I do. Like I love the sport of drag racing like it's as much as anything in my life, and I kind of feel like I'm living the dream every day. So.
Hell yeah, man. Well, we'll end it off there. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Come check out the events, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, buddy.